Welcome to Afterthoughts, everybody. This is our Recommend or Refute episode where we are each going to talk about a separate movie that we watched this week and whether we would recommend or refute it. I am your host, Michael Dixon. With me, as always, Mr. Ryan King.
Hey, how's it going? I do have a family movie. Just get that out of the way. Now
I am shocked.
I'm glad. Yeah,
Ryan,
shocked.
I'm
Shocked to find family movies on this podcast delivered by you.
And that voice is John Garcia. How's it going, John?
Hey, I fell off the wagon while you were out, Dixon.
Yeah.
I'm shocked to hear that you fell off the wagon,
Shocked to
John.
find schlock in this podcast here. So yeah, I'm gonna bring the same kind of usual stuff I usually bring. So
Great. So some sort of boob thing. Okay.
that's right. Chesty Morgan's back, baby.
Ryan, tell us about your family movie that you watched this week.
Yeah, we were looking again for something. The kids are about to go back to school, so we're kind of having our last movie night. Darla went to pick, and I think after watching a little bit, she was like, "I thought this was the game where they do something with the board game or whatever." I'm like, "You mean Jumanji?" She's like, "Yeah, that was it." So she was wanting to watch Jumanji, but we end up watching Labyrinth, which I had on the list of
I've never seen
it's
that.
a movie to watch. Yeah, it's been a while since I watched it, and I'm a Jim Henson apologist.
Okay.
I guess
So I'll
that's an
get that.
okay apologist to be.
I'll get that part through. I find the Muppet movie amazing. It's one of my favorite movies, and I'll admit it does
Wow.
not age. It's an odd movie. So Labyrinth is a Henson directed movie. This and Dark Crystal were his attempt to make not as puppety movies with a little bit darker tone, both of which were horrible box office bombs and pretty much ended him doing that or exploring that any further. Which at the end of it, I'm like, Henson can make characters and he can work with people to bring characters to life and he can be funny. His really original dark humor stuff is funny, but I don't think he can necessarily make something cohesive and he needs some help in that area. I think he's a little too off the wall and needs to be reined in somehow.
He's a maverick renegade
Yeah.
when it comes to puppets.
So watching with my family, I think everyone kind of walked away being like, well, that was weird, which is pretty much what it is. I think this movie, normally I would have been like, oh, go watch Labyrinth. But having watched it recently, I'm like, yeah, this movie's just kind of weird. There's really not a lot necessarily going for it. This is saying that it has David Bowie and insane puppeteering, and I'm still like, that's
Yeah.
kind of sad. I think that the major failings that I have is it follows kind of a fairy tale simple piece that I almost immediately was like, oh, a better modern movie would have actually spent some time getting us introduced to the character and her faults so that we could understand the journey and the learnings instead of it just sort of being like an Alice in Wonderland or Wizard of Oz. They're kind of immediately in the other world and then just kind of dragged through that world and then come out the other end, learned a lesson, ?
Yeah.
Which is kind of what this movie does. And I know that that's what it's trying to do. And it does that, but it's kind of I don't need that anymore. Kind of boring. The puppeteering's amazing. There's some interesting effects for the time. The effects don't fucking hold up except for the puppets. There was an early attempt at an actual CGI animal that looks fucking awful, but it's the time, right? Yeah. It's minimal. It's very minimal.
And George Lucas saw that and he was like, God damn, I need to
more.
remake my whole movie.
Yes, all of it. Fucking David Bowie's in a completely other movie than everyone else, and it's wonderful. There are just
That movie's
asides
called
where
Cocaine.
he sings. Yeah.
Does he sing one of his hits or just
Nope,
original
he has his
He
own
made
song?
songs for this. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
There's 2-3 original Bowie songs in this that really honestly don't make sense in the plot anyway.
Nope.
So it's
Yeah.
Yep.
yeah.
That's awesome.
So I think all my family kind of walked away being like, all right, well, we watched that. So that's kind of my take on Labyrinth.
I'm really surprised that Darla did not watch Labyrinth as a younger child and had any kind of nostalgia. Because
Yeah, she had she was completely unaware of it.
anybody that
Yeah.
I know that is that fits the exact same, I don't want to stereotype Darla, but fits the same kind of pop culture background that Darla has.
Dirty Dancing? That's what you're getting at?
Well,
Yeah.
Dirty Dancing and all of the things that I've known Darla to really enjoy in the time that I've known her. is like also been like, oh, Labyrinth. Hell yeah, we're going to a Labyrinth screening tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or like a girls' night at Labyrinth sort of thing. And
Yeah.
just been like,
yeah,
all
I
right.
agree. I was kind of surprised that she was like absolutely completely unfamiliar with it. David Bowie's package in this, I know, was definitely a lot of women's
There's
awakening.
a massive package on David Bowie. That man works for the UPS.
Oh.
He's got a delivery. Yeah, I remember parts of this movie too. Like, it's been a while since I've seen it. And for some reason, you can, put me on trial if you want to. I always somehow tether it to The Princess Bride. I don't know if it's just the fairy tale thing or what the fuck it is, but I think about both of those and I'm like, those are both kind of weird but fun movies. But anytime I go back to Labyrinth, I'm like, oh yeah, this is actually way weirder than I remembered it being. Yeah, it has less substance than I always think it does. And I think I also tie in Neverending Story too. Why not? Just bundle them all together.
No, I would put like this and Neverending Story are similar beats, and I feel like Neverending Story fixes what my main complaint was, because we get time at the beginning of the movie to learn about Sebastian and his relationship with his father, how he is at school, the bullies. Like, there's a chunk of the movie at the beginning that gives us enough of the setup to care and then understand the stakes in the other world. Where Labyrinth, I'm like, does she die here? Or does she die in the real world? I don't even know where we are. Right? There's like no understanding of like what happened, how she got there. Like, none of that matters. And we honestly just see her practicing a play at the beginning to no one for no point. She comes home, bitches that her stepmother is making her watch a baby. It's unclear if her stepmother is really an asshole and this does happen all the time, or if she's just saying that because she's a teenager and is like, oh, you make me do this all the time, mom. Kind of, and that's it. And that's all we get. And then she's in the goblin world. Like, that's it. So there's just really no attempt at setting anything up.
Wow. Yeah, I forgot about that part. The setup is really weak.
Is that
and
young
then
Jennifer Connelly? Is it?
Yeah, this is young Jennifer
How is
Connelly.
she in that?
I think honestly, like, that's where the strength kind of lies. This is it's honestly her and puppets, and then her and David Bowie for a little bit. They really don't interact a whole lot.
That's asking a lot of a child actor to act alongside puppets. That's that seems difficult.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, and I think that she does a good job. She comes off well. I think she is a relatable figure, relatable teen, just in sort of like she's. And again, this is where it's that simple story, is then she's just a blank slate for the most part that you can reflect onto, which is great as a kid and sort of stupid as an adult, right?
Yes, that's right. You're willing to share more of who you are as a kid. That's why Twilight was so popular.
So Ryan, are you recommending this movie?
Yeah, no. I don't even think there's, like, I was kind of thinking about it from like the puppeteering effects work, and there really isn't that much that's interesting that you couldn't see in something else done by Henson that's done better.
Yeah.
Like, just watch Dark Crystal and then you get the pinnacle of his wizardry in a completely imaginary, bizarre world. You just kind of get to experience it, be like, all right, I watched that. And it's a little bit better in that vein, where Labyrinth, I'm like, well. The only interesting thing is David Bowie, honestly.
Yeah. That's kind of where, like, I'm amazed. Like, Netflix brought Dark Crystal back for like a limited series that I think also underperformed. It's like, hey, wow, there's a trend here. But I was kind of amazed that they wouldn't try to spin off Labyrinth too and bring in another musical artist that's kind of in the same vein as Bowie or has the same kind of magnetism as Bowie does.
That seems difficult.
Well, yeah, but also, like, I'm sure you could find some kind of cool musical twist. Labyrinth had songs written by Bowie that were nonsensical, and I'm sure you could find another musical artist that can write nonsensical shit now and has a surreal vibe to it. Or shit, man, make a Labyrinth limited series and get Kendrick Lamar to do it. I dare you. It would be baller.
Rated R.
Yeah,
hard R for kids.
I think what's tough is, like, you honestly just have to, like, remake it, and I feel like that's just always derivative when you're like, well, we'll just do the same thing with new people. Yeah. Because how can you expand on what, honestly, I feel like at the end of the movie, it just is like, oh, she's made it all up. Like, that seems to be the the plot of the movie. Because if you go watch it a
It's
second
like a
time, you're
Pan's
like,
Labyrinth kind of thing.
yeah. So I'm like, we
Okay.
can't explore
Yeah.
Pan's Labyrinth more because that was her. That was her head. That was in her
Wrong,
head. Right?
wrong,
Like,
Ryan. You absolutely could retcon the shit out of it. And be
Yeah.
like,
Yes,
there's actually
yeah.
another world that's the dream layer.
Yeah,
I
and
like
that's where
Pan's
she got the
Labyrinth.
feelings from. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
I think Pan's Labyrinth is interesting because it's like her coping with the shit that's going on around her.
That's
Right? She's
right.
inventing the story
Right.
because she can't deal with reality. Is there any sort of aspect of that in Labyrinth?
I don't know. I guess her
Hard to
stepmom.
tell.
She
I
just
love
not.
how
I
you're
get-
just-
there's
you
some, like-
genuinely were.
Yeah. There's a newspaper clipping with her mom. I don't know if her mom is dead or just left her dad or what. So again, like I don't know what the backstory is to get an impression about why she's in this imaginary world. The newspaper clipping of her mom is her mom hanging out with David Bowie. Did they have a relationship? Did she bump into David Bowie? I have no idea, but I guess that's why she's infatuated with David Bowie. I couldn't help every single time I saw him, but to say, "Hi, I'm David Bowie," every time I saw him.
Amazing.
Cool. All right. We're going to go out of the normal order, and I'm going to talk about my movie next because Ryan has to leave, and I really want to hear his take on The Searchers. If you listen to our High Plains Drifter episode, Ryan brought up The Searchers, and I told him we were going to put a pin in that because that was actually my recommend or refute this week. So I went on a Western kick this week up to High Plains Drifter. I was like, it'd be interesting to watch some earlier Westerns and kind of how we got to High Plains Drifter. And The Searchers is one of those. I also watched The Wild Bunch this week. I had never seen that before.
That's another. Yeah.
Yeah. And, kind of getting progressively more nihilistic and more anti-hero-y in the nature of those movies. I had seen The Searchers before, but it had been a long time. I think I was in college the last time I had seen it. And I didn't remember much about it, but I was shocked when I put the movie on how many scenes I was like, oh yeah, I remember everything that happened in this scene. And like, it was amazing how much it had imprinted itself in my subconscious. And I didn't really remember how much I liked it and how much it stayed with me. John Ford I think is a fascinating director. I want to explore more of his filmography. He has a bunch of movies that have been lost to time, like from the silent era that have just never been recovered. And then, he made movies into the sound era, then went and fought in World War II, and then came back and kept making movies. And like Stagecoach, I think is really great. That was Wayne's first like big screen appearance. And, he made a lot of movies with John Wayne, but he also did a lot of work with Henry Fonda and with other actors. And The Searchers is probably my favorite of his movies that I have seen. And it didn't do well at the time, but like it did okay, but it wasn't like critically acclaimed. And since then it has become, very highly regarded among cinephiles and critics. But Ryan, you had mentioned that you were kind of surprised at Wayne's response to High Plains Drifter because of The Searchers. And I agree with you. And I think it's interesting to look back at The Searchers in that context. That movie is about John Wayne is a Confederate soldier who has refused to surrender and has been just like out who knows where for 3 years after the end of the war, shows up at his brother's ranch and is like, I'm back now. And then very shortly after that, some Native Americans come and raid the property, kill Wayne's brother, his sons, and kidnap his two daughters, so Wayne's two nieces, and take them out and kidnap them and assimilate them into their tribe. And so Wayne and another guy who was kind of an adopted child of his brother decide to set out and go on this unrelenting quest to find these two women and bring them back to their society. And it's a very bleak, kind of relentless movie. These basically Wayne and this kid give up years of their lives to just kind of fight this revenge story and try to bring these girls back into like proper white society. There's a lot of like virulent racism in the movie. And I think it's not a reflection of Ford. It's a reflection of like him trying to accurately portray the attitudes in the American West and kind of how tribalistic and racist it was. And It's shot in Monument Valley. It looks incredible. That all these massive stone structures, it just pops off the fucking screen. It looks great. Wayne, a lot of times in his career played, the good guy standing up for moral white society. And in this movie, he is an anti-hero who shoots people in the back and doesn't give a fuck. And he is kind of leaning into that idea. And The Searchers was influential for later Westerns that had these anti-heroes that were a little bit more blatant than what Wayne was portraying. But it's interesting to see that movie and to see how much he hated the way the Western genre evolved from there. It's like he was willing to take it that far, but not any further. And he was very upset when other people took it further than that. But I think it's a fascinating movie, and it's a little bit like, it's 1956. The acting is a little stagey and over the top, but it hits really hard. Like, there's a lot of scenes that I was surprised the emotional weight that they had on me, despite the actors kind of being very theatrical and acting toward the back row. They're doing a really good job. And I think Wayne is also very good in the movie. But Ryan, I know we're short on time with you.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on The Searcher?
To me, the two movies I kind of point out of like the end of Westerns, and Wild Bunch is there too. So that's like, sometimes I forget about that one, but Wild Bunch is another good example of kind of the end of the old Westerns. This and Shane, to me, are the two. And I think the reason I always think of them is the endings are similar, with our main character like walking off alone, like leaving behind the world that that is not a part of it anymore. In particular, like, it's fucking horrible. This character is fucking horrible through this. And I agree, it's one where it's like most people are, but at the end, like, there are times, and then towards the end, like explicitly, where he's like, oh, you want to live with the native people, and he's just gonna kill her.
Yep. He's super racist.
Right?
Yeah. He's like, you're not, he's like, she's not white anymore. Like, she deserves to die.
Yeah,
like, holy
exactly.
shit.
And it's like that outright horribly racist character. And then and then he kind of walks away because it's like, he just doesn't fit in with anyone. Right. And I kind of felt like that was sort of this, like, because the Western mentality doesn't fit in. It was much more like this than it was these other earlier Wayne movies. This is more what things were like. That it's weird that then that's why I want to go back
definitely.
And maybe he didn't realize it. Like, he was such a horrible person himself that he's like, that's what I would have done.
He views that as the upright moral person. And maybe at the end of the movie, Wayne's character, Ethan, makes the right decision, right? But accepts her back into the family. But he makes that, it seems like a split decision. Like, he's like on the verge of maybe murdering her and then doesn't do it. But then he brings her back into the family, but then he leaves, right? He's like, I can't deal with this. Like, I can't understand this concept of mixing cultures. And it's interesting because he's a guy that he understands different cultures, right? He has conversations with other white people in his community about what Comanches believe, and he can speak some Comanche, and he is better equipped to converse with other races than other people in the movie, but he's actually less understanding than a lot of other people in the movie. And there are good, moral, upright people in the movie. And I think maybe that's the difference for Wayne, where there is, his character ends up kind of making the right decision in the end. And there are good, God-fearing people in the movie, literally, that are the people you're supposed to be rooting for. And so I think that's probably the difference for him and why he couldn't get behind High Plains Drifter.
Yeah, maybe I guess that it's actually everyone is terrible.
Yeah.
But from the deplorable main character, deplorable people standpoint, I'm like, is The Searchers.
Yeah.
And I
similar
do
in
go
a
back
lot
and
of
listen.
ways.
Yeah, to his kind of thinking, the contemporary time. And it really is, I feel like that's the switch in this late 50s. And we kind of see everything. You're talking about the kind of deterioration of the Hays Code. We get into the 60s and we just have this completely different feel of movies that comes out that tend to just sort of throw away a lot of the things from before. And that's the Westerns that we get into that do sort of like toss it all out. And it's like The Searchers is in that spot where your grandpa is watching AMC and Rio Bravo comes on, and then The Searchers comes on, and then Hondo comes on, and he doesn't notice that like there's something different in the middle of his sandwich and westerns.
Yeah.
I like Rio Bravo too. It's good, but it's different. It's not The Searchers. Yeah.
I do wonder. That was my other question I was thinking of last. So like, what is Baby's first western? If we were going, you're talking about watching like 3 westerns and working your way down.
Stagecoach,
like,
maybe.
Maybe Stagecoach. I was like, Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. I was trying to get one where it's like
Man Who
kind
Shot
of
Liberty
good.
Valance. Yeah.
Yeah, like kind of actually good, and not necessarily like just.
That's kind of dark. Like that's morally ambiguous and dark in a way too.
In a way,
yeah.
But we still have an outright hero.
True.
Yeah, I was thinking like High Noon. There's some of those where it's like there's an outright hero kind of clearly, but it's not just such like a we come in and shoot everybody, circle the wagons, kill everyone who's not white.
But High Noon's a pretty dark Western movie too. Like there is a hero standing up for what's right, but it's a very damning movie about like the character of America and like small towns and stuff.
Maybe those are the middle. That's the middle step before you move to High Plains Drifter.
First.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of Westerns are much darker than people want to remember them, I think. You know, people idealize the Western like they do like American ingenuity and exceptionalism. You
and
know?
apple
and it's
pie.
Like, yeah, and it's like, it's not what a lot of these movies were doing. At least the ones that have held up that like we go back to today. Like, and I've watched a lot of Westerns and it's like, I go back to the ones that I've heard are good, right? And those ones that I've gone back and watched, for the most part, they are fairly dark. There are your John Wayne movies from the time that John Ford was not involved with that are like just yay go white people in the West type of shit, but you know, those aren't held up as great movies. It's just like they're around because John Wayne was in them, and that's why they've survived this long.
The ones that come to mind for me of like Wayne movies, McClintock, which just has a horrible representation of Native people, and then culminates in Wayne dragging a woman back across town to show her where it's at, which also I think is the end of, what is it? What's the Irish one? A
Quiet Man? The Quiet Man?
It's the same thing, where except he drags her a lot further, which is odd that there's
Throws her
2
on a
Wayne
bed.
movies that
Yes, my
end
dad
with him.
loves that movie. He won't fucking shut up
That's John
about
Ford,
it.
actually, and I haven't seen it, but I do want to watch it because it's Ford, but yeah.
There's an interest. Like McClintock's just kind of all around a horrible time.
Yeah.
If you look back at it,
I watched that on
White
TV
Man, there's like
when
maybe
I was
some
in
interesting
college,
stuff.
but I don't remember much of it.
Yeah, but just again, I was talking about the like when do movies stop being rapey? It's just like the final. Yeah, the final cap plot is like, now let's drag a woman across the country.
Yeah.
Over my shoulder to show her how to be a good woman now.
Yeah. And the Searchers has some brutal rape in it, but it's all off screen and you just see the effects of it, right? Like you see the bloody dress lying at the site of the burned down house, right? You don't actually see Clint Eastwood go in and rape somebody like you do in High Plains Drifter, but
Yep.
Cool. All right, well, peace out.
Yeah. All right. See you, Ryan.
I'll listen back in, John. Yeah, I got to drop.
Yeah, sure, buddy. Let me know what you think. I'm gonna turn my chair.
John, have you seen The Searchers? Any questions or thoughts or anything?
I haven't seen The Searchers. You know, honestly, John Ford's another director that's in my blind spot. And I know John Ford has a blind spot too, if I understand correctly. Doesn't he have an eye patch or something?
Oh,
or is that just the David Lynch representation in The Fabelmans?
Perhaps. I don't know a lot about John Ford the man, but it's possible.
Yeah, who knows?
He did have a very good eye for movie making. If it was only one, I'd be impressed because his movies are visually stunning. Like The Searchers, like every frame looks like a goddamn painting. Like it's just beautiful to look at, and like it's all shot in Monument Valley in like just the color pops off the screen in this fascinating way. It's interesting to be like a lot of the movies in the 50s, you know, they're getting more into color films. They're becoming more common, and you have Technicolor, and this one was like Vista Vision and all these different things. And there are all these different ways to represent color at the time. And some of them from this time are so vibrant in a way that like just pops off the screen like nothing you would ever see today. And The Searchers is like that. I was like, I've never seen a sky that blue. That's fucking wild. Like,
yeah.
it's just crazy.
Man, Yeah, I have Stagecoach. I haven't watched it yet.
You should. The stunts in Stagecoach are fucking wild.
Man. Okay.
Like 1939, it's clearly all on screen. Like there's like a cameraman who has to like lay under a horse as it jumps over and kind of shit. Like it's pretty
That's
wild.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Criterion sent me, I think, duplicates. So I ended up giving one to my uncle who is like really hyped on it.
Oh, there you go.
All right. But yeah, it's something that I've been meaning to. It's another one of those things where it's another director I've just been meaning to get back into and actually experience a lot of the movies that he's made. So
yeah, and I think Ford is a director who like his connection with Wayne has become detrimental today to how people view him. And like you think, oh, it's John Wayne. Oh, it's going to be your standard whatever, like good guy Western, like killing the Indians. But no, like his movies are very good and very different than a lot of the standard Western stuff that came out at the time. So
I mean, there's a reason they're in the Criterion collection.
Yeah.
So, you know, that
I think I've only seen Ford movies with Wayne in them, and there's still some with Wayne that I haven't seen, but I do want to explore into. Like I have the Criterion Blu-ray of My Darling Clementine, which is a Western he made with Henry Fonda. And there's other stuff he's done that is kind of outside of that vein. But he used Wayne in a really great way, like accentuating what he did well. And especially so in The Searchers, and kind of turning him into this anti-hero character that like you despise in scenes and like really hate what he's doing, but you're also kind of rooting for him. And I don't know, maybe I guess film noir was really the first instance, like during and post World War II, where you start to have characters like that. But The Searchers feels like the like preeminent American Western anti-hero prior to spaghetti Westerns coming on and kind of
part of the post-Western when it hits.
Yeah, kind of advancing that concept further and evolving it into something different. But
cool. I'm excited to see it. My only other question is, do you have a John Wayne impression? Do you ever try to attempt a John Wayne?
Hey, Pilgrim. I guess no is the answer to that.
I love telling people that he was in Genghis Khan because I'm like, yeah, he went from Westerns where he's like, saddle up the wagons, we're heading west, pilgrims, to Genghis Khan where he's like, saddle up the wagons, we're heading west, pilgrims.
Yeah, shocking that he played Genghis Khan. I have a morbid curiosity about watching that movie.
Oh, I would watch that with you if you want to watch it at some point. I've never seen it.
I've never doubted that you would watch that movie if someone offered.
Oh, definitely.
So yeah, I would definitely recommend The Searchers. I think it is pretty fascinating. Again, like there are scenes that feel very old Hollywood stagey, but they're still done so well. I was shocked at the emotional weight that they had. And there's like a subplot that is very affecting about the kind of Wayne's like adoptive nephew that is going along with him on this journey to find Wayne's nieces, and he is an eighth. I'm blanking on the Indian tribe. He's an eighth native, and he is like been abandoned and adopted by this family, and he is kind of dealing with a lot of these racial issues himself because he feels the tension and what's going on around him. And meanwhile, there's a local woman who's in love with him, and he like continues to throw that away in pursuit of something that seems to be something that can't be achieved. Right? He's
Very
on this
nebulous or something.
Yeah, this revenge quest to like get his like adoptive sisters back, but like it's been years, and he has this woman at home who loves him, and he keeps like being like, no, I can't be with you because I have to just like go around the country and find my sisters somewhere. And it's like everybody's like telling Wayne and this kid like, you have to stop this is ridiculous.
Wow.
Like you are destroying yourselves and throwing away your lives for something like, they're dead. You need to stop doing this. Like you need to give up and move on with your lives. And they can't do it. And the effect that it has on them and on the people around them, it really comes through in a powerful way that I wasn't expecting it to. So yeah, I was really impressed with it. It's pretty great. And again, like I had seen it before, but it was a long time ago and I'd forgotten most of it. And it was, I'm really glad I watched it again. So
nice. Well, I'll have to check it out along with a lot of other John Ford movies.
Yeah.
So, cool. Well,
John, what did you watch this week?
I'm actually calling an audible right now. I'm going to surprise you. I'm going to
my
ambush
God.
you.
Okay.
In the middle of this podcast right now, everybody, you're hearing it live. This is not something that's been pre-recorded or determined. I was going to talk about Blade with Wesley Snipes, which
I've never seen that.
Peak Wesley Snipes Marvel vehicle in which Wesley Snipes even works in the line, some motherfuckers want to ski uphill for no fucking reason. He just does that. But
Are you're not telling me it's better than Demolition Man?
It's not better than Demolition Man. I have a friend who would probably argue that. But it is, peak Wesley Snipes before he got, what did he get? Tax fraud?
Yeah.
Tax evasion?
Yeah. He didn't pay his taxes.
Yep. There
went
you
to
go,
jail.
everybody. Pay your taxes. I'm not going to talk about that though, because while you were talking about John Ford and the Searchers, I couldn't stop thinking about David Lynch as John Ford. And I couldn't stop thinking about how I just finished Twin Peaks, the first season.
Holy shit, John.
I texted you that I was watching it.
You did.
3 episodes in. And then the next thing I know, I finished the first season. And I haven't started on second one yet. I'm about to get started on it. But holy fucking shit, this show. I really want to talk about how this is. I feel like this is the peak, before the one peak of the Twin Peaks before I ride down the roller coaster into David Lynch territory and I start watching more Lynch films.
Yeah, you have only seen Eraserhead, right?
I've only seen Eraserhead,
which is maybe my favorite Lynch film. It's
and
fucking
Dune,
great.
which we don't acknowledge.
Yeah, no. Lynch doesn't like that movie. Like the studio took it from him.
Absolutely. And the studio took that from Jodorowsky. So there's a troubled past there. But yeah, like David Lynch is another blind spot of mine. And so for like years, people have told me, you got to watch Twin Peaks. You just got to see it. It's so good. It's wild. I talked to a local filmmaker recently she's a surrealist, and she was like, have you seen Twin Peaks? Like, that's my whole kind of Bible. That's what I reference when I want to make shit.
Oh, wow.
And she was lamenting how like American cinema and even American commercials don't embrace surrealism the way that they should. And it's one of those things where the more people talk about it, the less I want to watch it.
Yeah.
But I powered through.
I get that. Yeah.
I absolutely powered through this time because I had watched the first episode of Twin Peaks like 3 years ago, and I thought, meh.
The first episode it's like 2 hours long.
Yeah.
And it's very slow. It takes its time to step. I don't even think Kyle MacLachlan is in the first episode.
He's in it.
Right?
He shows up at the very end.
But barely.
Barely. He's not in that whole thing.
That's really the only good thing that came out of Dune was Lynch and MacLachlan's relationship.
Oh God, Kyle MacLachlan. I fucking love that guy.
Oh, he's so good in Twin Peaks and in Blue Velvet and a lot of things.
I can't wait to
Lynch.
dive into Blue Velvet and just see all these other things. That's the thing. Twin Peaks has like invigorated my desire to watch more Lynch stuff. And so I'm really fucking excited. But the kind of premise, I was pitching it to some friends recently, so I've workshopped this a little bit. If you go into Twin Peaks, the first episode is centered around the death of a local town resident in Twin Peaks, Laura Palmer, who's a high schooler. And you might think, because of your current contemporary brain, this is going to be one of those like, oh, it's a drama where I can follow everything. And I describe it as like if NCIS was like a serial. An actual continuous story, you might assume initially that it's going to be that. It is not that at all. There is a crime at the center of it. There is a driving motivation for the first season, at least. It's my understanding that the studio stepped in for the second season and that they started making creative decisions, and that resulted in Lynch leaving for a little bit.
Yeah. I still really like the second season. I know some people have qualms with like the second half of the second season. I watched through the whole thing and had a great time. So. Well,
that's good to know. Yeah. Like I just heard like at the time that it came out, it was really just pushing, like the whole reason Twin Peaks even got greenlit was because ABC was like desperate for a TV show.
They had to be. This was the first like prestige TV show that ever existed. It's
absolutely
the only show at that time. Like it came out in 91.
Yeah, a little bit earlier, I think 90.
Yeah. And like you had to actually watch all the episodes in order to understand it. And in an age where we're just putting this shit on the airwaves and hoping people pay attention, like that's a hard sell. You can't go back. Once it's off the air, it's off. Like they're not replaying that shit. And you can't go back and stream the previous episodes.
Not only did they make this bold choice because they gave Mark Frost and David Lynch full creative control to do what they wanted to in the first season. That Mark Frost and David Lynch even said to them, don't even try to give us notes because you're not going to fucking understand what this show is. And the studio still gave them notes and they still didn't listen.
Amazing.
And so the first season, for everybody out there, is 8 episodes long. The first episode is an hour and a half. Every episode after is about 45 minutes. It's the usual hour-long TV block.
Yep.
It aired at the same time that Cheers did. And Cheers was like the fucking top of the charts.
Oh,
Like,
I didn't know that. That's
nobody
interesting.
would think that you could top Cheers, but it started amassing this following because, what's going to happen next?
A lot of young people were
could've-
into it, I think, at the time, right?
And like,
Yeah.
who murdered Laura Palmer? Who could it be? And like all of these twists. And if you watch it, you'll get this weird, it's a pastiche. It's a surreal pastiche of these different genres. You get a little soap opera in it. You get a crime
noir.
procedural. You get some
Yeah.
noir. You get a little bit of all of these little seasonings that come together. And then you get David Lynch's kind of signature surrealism that'll come in and swoop down and like just take characters into dreamland. And you have all of these really weird sequences they're not like, every minute you're getting something David Lynch weird. You just have characters that are quirky and in a way they win your love. They're not relatable to the full extent that you would think like, oh, I'm watching something where this is somebody in a small town I could totally see. It's like, it feels like everything's cranked a little bit higher in how people interact and react to each other.
The stakes feel higher. That every conversation feels like there's some like static electricity there.
Yeah, there's something there. And the score is fucking beautiful for as kind
Love
of like
Angelo Badalamenti.
Yeah.
He is incredible.
for as like, I don't know if you watch other shows at the time or like soap operas, that kind of thing, it has a similar kind of melodrama to it, but there is something so brooding and deep about it that resonates, and you just can't, the moment the show's over, you can't help but hear it in places you go and in things that you see. And all of these things just like took me for a ride. And I initially begrudgingly, anytime I start a prestige show, I'm like, oh, hour and a half to get into this. And then 45 minutes every episode. I texted you even and was like, fuck, I forgot the episodes are like 45 minutes long, but I'm not complaining. Like I found out that, the guy who played Luther in the Warriors is in this show. And I was kind of like, oh, that guy. And there are a few other faces that I've seen before. And then the drama started kicking in. And at times the show, while it's so it can be surreal and weird. There's a whole segment where the FBI agent played by Kyle MacLachlan, Dale Cooper, gives a speech on Tibet and he like talks about this layer of how he perceives dreams and how they feed into his crime solving problems. And it's one of those things where like, if my dad was watching it, I could definitely see him being like, this is bullshit. But I'm on a different metaphysical level where I was like, oh fuck, I definitely am vibing with whatever the fuck this is.
Oh yeah.
I love this. It goes from that to like really hard crime kind of narrative drama, and it's so mesmerizing. I can't take my eyes off it. And I'm like, I can feel myself being sucked into it.
That you like it so much.
Yeah, man, I'm all about it. It's so great. The only thing that I regret is that I can't register it on Letterboxd until I watch the full series. But hey, man, suffering from success, I suppose. So I'm the first season of Twin Peaks is like just the biggest over the moon recommend I have for folks. I think that some of the historical context might help you enjoy it more. I've talked to a few other friends who have been hesitant to watch it just because they've had the same kind of people telling them, oh, it's so good, you got to watch it.
Yeah.
Or
I always get that reaction when everybody tells me to watch whatever TV show. I just lock down. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that.
You're like, I'm not going to go with this.
But not fucking watching Squid Game, okay?
But I'm so glad that I stuck with it and I pushed through. And to say push through is just it's an expression, everybody. It's not actually what I did because the show itself is so mesmerizing. It carried me a lot of the way.
The pushing through was pressing play on the first episode.
That's right. The pushing through is the first hour and a half to really get to know your characters. Okay. Just sit down with like a cup of tea or some
coffee.
Dessert
Sit
coffee.
down with a cup of coffee.
Yeah. Good coffee. And they got a cherry pie that'll fucking kill you.
It's damn good coffee.
But yeah, like, these moments of it, they make me really hopeful for what I'm going to see in the rest of Lynch. And this is the beginning of the ride. I'm super excited for it. So
awesome.
I would recommend Twin Peaks. I would recommend the first season anyway. That's what I'm qualified to recommend. But yeah, I'm excited to look at the second season, and I'll watch Fire Walk with Me. I know that's in the Criterion Collection. And then
The Return,
which I've heard.
The Return is interesting.
I've heard The Return is very indulgent, and I love my indulgence when it comes to directors.
You'll like
vision.
it. You'll like The Return.
All right, sweet. Well, I'm looking forward to all of those things, but that's what I'm bringing to this one. That's my audible, I wanted to call it, and it was merited, I would say.
Yes, I'm very glad that you decided to talk about this instead of Blade.
That's right.
Good call. I love Twin Peaks. I echo everything that you just said. I probably owe it a rewatch. It's been, I don't know, 6 or 7 years since I've watched it. I would like to go through and watch it again. I think the moment that I remember as like when I kind of got on board with the show, I think it was the third episode. And Kyle MacLachlan's character is trying to determine like what leads to follow by like blindfolding himself and like shooting targets or shooting a bow and arrow into targets.
Rocks at a glass.
Yeah. And he's just like determining what leads are good by just blindfolding himself and throwing shit in the woods. And I'm like, okay, what's going on here? This is interesting. Like where it starts to kind of pull itself away from reality. And then I believe it's at the end of that episode, there is a weird ass dance sequence in a room with some red curtains and a zebra floor.
The Red Room.
And I was like, oh my God, I'm fucking in for this. This is weird and I don't know what it is, but I'm fucking gonna keep watching.
He gives a full lecture on Tibet and the Dalai Lama, and then he goes into his suspect picking process, and everybody on the show is like, are you really sure about this? And he's like, yes. And then it ends, with that sequence. And that sequence is done with like backwards dialogue and a lot of dream. It is exactly what you would see in a dream. And
the David backwards dialogue in Twin Peaks is very unsettling and fascinating.
That's part of the draw to anybody out there who's still listening and I'm like, I don't know if I would like that. Let me just ask the question. Have you ever wanted to see what a dream feels like? Because David Lynch is great at conjuring that, and that's what he represents in the third episode.
Filmmaker does that better than Lynch, conjuring a dream feeling, where just everything is out of place, and you're not really sure why, but you know it's wrong, and you can't look away. And
exactly. And so the first 2 episodes ground you, and the third episode slowly starts to lift your feet off the ground and take you with it. And then from there, hands in the air, man. It's the ride. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the same for me. I honestly, the first 2 episodes, I was like, all right, okay. And then the third episode just got me. I was like, oh, okay. Hell yeah.
What is this?
But yeah, I think it has that same problem that that's talking about getting through the first and second episode. In our previous episode on the if this releases at the right time on the Venture Brothers, then we talk about how there is sort of a commitment to different shows where people are like, oh, you got to get through the first season, or you know, when they talk about prestige shit, they're like, you got to get through this and then you'll enjoy it.
And I immediately am like, nope. When
I'm
somebody tells me
not going to do that.
Yeah.
And I feel like Twin Peaks, it's more of the getting through the first 2 episodes is suffering from the same problem that Blade Runner suffers from, in a way where it's playing off of tropes that are established, things that you've been familiar with that have been shredded through modern time and contemporary times as well. And so when you watch it, you'll be like, these characters aren't reacting the way that I would expect them to. This crime doesn't seem the same way that I would see in CSI and that kind of shit. And that, as much as you feel that, fight that feeling, because when it takes you, it will go. And it's really about getting familiar with the characters, how quirky and weird some of them are, how grounded some of them are, and just embracing that mix. That's the beauty of the show.
Mm-hmm.
It's not trying to be a, villain of the week shit. And it's not trying to be, this weird, we're going to go for 8 seasons on this epic drama following a family. No, that's not what it's about. It is playing so much with what television could be. And it's fucking beautiful. So.
Yeah, definitely. I think Twin Peaks is probably my favorite prestige TV show, and I think Lynch really takes advantage of the episodic nature of the show and builds these characters in a fascinating way over time that I think so many prestige TV shows now just completely fumble that and just draw very short plots over way too much time and just like have the camera look at characters staring pensively off in the distance and you're supposed to infer something from that. And I think that Lynch is just so much better than that, right? And he's making something that is just fascinating and weaves together in a really great way and pays off as you go along. And it's just a fascinating show. And I think one of the reasons it works so well is Kyle MacLachlan. And he's really great at towing the line between he's playing this guy who is this FBI agent that is on the surface trying to display this idea that he is this, kind of perfect, good-natured American lawman coming to help out and be really nice. But he has this kind of unsettling nature to him as well, where like you're not necessarily sure what his motives are as he comes into town. And, like he is the protagonist of the show, but, like he's more complex than that. And I think he plays that character in a fascinating way where like, at any moment, you're not necessarily sure what his motives are and what he's thinking as he's going along. And for most of the time, you're like, yeah, he's doing what's right. But then occasionally you're like, wait a minute, is he doing something nefarious here? And like, because of the way he plays the character, you're almost not sure necessarily what to think of him and what he's doing, kind of coming in as this outsider to this community. And he's great. I wish we had more Kyle MacLachlan starring roles. Like he's so good in this. He's so good in Blue Velvet. And I feel like he hasn't been used well by other directors. And I think that is sad because he is a very good actor and really just like he's a lot of the reason why Twin Peaks works to the degree that it does.
Yeah, I would say it's funny because when you're talking about like whether or not he's nefarious, I never got like a sense that he might have some nefarious intention. I just got the sense of he's the dichotomy of like a Boy Scout from the FBI and somebody who's completely unhinged in their experimental thoughts. Like I think about like David Fincher's Mindhunter and sort of the stories of like when the FBI was experimenting with, could we talk to serial killers and actually learn like a pattern of behavior? And how like there was a lot of guesswork done for that. And his character feels that same way where he's like, he's lecturing dudes about Tibet and talking about the dream world and how it influences the decision he makes in sort of the framework of like apple pie justice. And at the same time, he'll stop to talk about how great the coffee and the cherry pie is in a place. And he'll just
that man
bounce
loves
back.
Coffee and pie.
In the middle of talking about like Laura Palmer's death, he's like, what kind of trees you got up here? They're just great. Like I fill my lungs with the air from it. And it's this like really concerning amount of fluctuation between somebody who's like,
he's like too earnest, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, wait a minute, I don't buy it.
We
Like
have like
what's
a
going on
dead
here?
teenage girl and she's got these kind of wounds. And then what would you say? How much is a plot of land here if I was to buy a cabin? Like just that fluctuation. You're like, what the fuck? But it ends up working and you're like, holy shit, this character, I really love those aspects of them. Like they're able to do business and pleasure, I suppose, in the place that they go to. But yeah.
He's also constantly leaving notes for someone in a recorder, but it's like it's in a tape recorder that he's talking into, and you never see him like mail them off somewhere. You never see him call her or write her a letter or anything. And I'm like, is this guy insane? Like, is he just making notes for no one as he's going? Like, what? And so there's this air of mystery, obviously into the plot of the movie, and like we're trying to figure out the murderer and all these things, but there's an air of mystery into the main character too that I think is really fascinating. And MacLachlan plays it in a way that just works perfectly tonally for what the show needs.
Absolutely, I agree. So I'm thankful I watched it.
I'm thankful you watched it, John.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to watching Blue Velvet and getting into all the other David Lynch films, and really just kind of diving into more of Lynch's expression in film and what he does.
We need to do a David Lynch movie on the podcast. We haven't done that yet, and he's one of my favorite filmmakers. So I really want to get into more Lynch shit, get into the weird stuff.
Hey man, we'll make it happen.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's plenty of time to make something go on for David Lynch here. It's not going to be Dune, everybody. Okay, I know you think that I'm a schlock guy, but I'm not bringing Dune to this podcast. I refuse unless we have a guest that insists it. But don't you dare.
Maybe we'll do the Villeneuve Dune, but not the Lynch Dune.
We will talk in passing about the Lynch Dune when we talk about the Villeneuve. Yeah. But yeah. So there you go. Recommend.
Cool. All right. So we have a refute from Ryan for Labyrinth. Ryan is no longer with us on this podcast. So, John, would you like to say any disparaging remarks about Ryan?
I just want to offer a moment of silence for Ryan, everybody. He's no longer with us on this podcast.
He has passed into the great beyond of some sort of family obligation that he had.
He's watching that family movie up in the sky. The sky of California.
I am giving a glowing recommendation for The Searchers, and John is giving a probably even more glowing recommendation of Twin Peaks.
It's a dreamy type of
season
recommendation
one
for season one
of
of
Twin Peaks.
Yes.
So, this was a fun one. Love talking about David Lynch, and everybody go watch Twin Peaks. It's very good. Cool. So, with me as always, not anymore. Ryan.
Let me do an impression. Hold on, I'll do it.
Okay.
All right, Ryan King.
Okay. I don't know if that sounded like Ryan.
Close enough. I tried to get a nasaliness to it. Ryan, I hope that you're flattered. I attempted.
And this motherfucker.
Hi, sir.
I have been your host, Michael Dixon. Thanks for joining us this week. We'll see you later.
Hey there, movie buffs, TV toughs, and all listeners in between. John here from the Afterthoughts podcast. I just wanted to drop in at the end of this episode and say thanks for listening. If you've got afterthoughts of your own to share, hit us up. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Afterpod, or jump into a conversation on our Discord server. You can find info for this and more at theafterpod.transistor.fm. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.